Hello and welcome. We begin the news with Ukraine gets F-16 fighter jets to boost defense against Russia. United Nations security fear all-out war after Haniyeh killing in Iran risks dragging US into war. 17-year-old charged over Southport stabbing as protests rage, and France's colonial plan blamed for New Caledonia's division. On Russia-Ukraine conflict, Lithuania's foreign minister and United States official have said the first batch of long-awaited F-16 jets have arrived in Ukraine, an effort Kyiv has said will aid rebuild its depleted air force. Ukraine has been eager to acquire F-16s built by Lockheed Martin because of their destructive power and universal availability. The fighter jet is equipped with a 20mm cannon and can carry bombs, rockets and missiles. Lithuanian Foreign Minister Gabrielius Landsbergis said on Wednesday that F-16s in Ukraine, another impossible thing, turned out to be totally possible. A U.S. official speaking on condition of anonymity said the delivery has been concluded. The Ukrainian government has not confirmed receipt of the jets. Ukraine has been pushing its Western allies for F-16s for months, saying they were critical in fighting back against the onslaught of missiles Russia has fired against it. The West has moved haltingly towards providing the jets after earlier concerns that arming Ukraine with advanced weaponry will further intensify the war with Russia. The US has also been training Ukrainian pilots on how to fly the jets and has already graduated the first group of pilots on its operation. NATO allies to supply Ukraine with 60 warplanes. Joe Biden, US president, authorized sending the US-built warplanes to Ukraine in August 2023. That came after months of pressure from Kyiv and internal debates within the US administration. Belgium, Denmark and the Netherlands and Norway, all NATO members, have committed to providing Ukraine with over 60 planes. That number is dwarfed by the Russian jet fleet, which is estimated to be about 10 times bigger. Ukraine needs at least 130 F-16 fighter jets to neutralize Russian air power, according to Ukrainian officials. F-16s can fly up to twice the speed of sound and have a maximum range of more than 2,000 miles, 3,200 kilometers. On Israel-Gaza war, countries of the United Nations Security Council UNSC have criticized the killings of Hamas political chief Ismail Haniyeh in Iran and called for ramp-up diplomatic efforts to stop an all-out war in the Middle East. On Wednesday, the United Nations Security Council's emergency meeting came as Iran and Hamas, the Palestinian group that rules the war-torn Gaza Strip, blamed Israel for Haniyeh's death and promised to seek revenge. Israel has not admitted responsibility for the attack in Tehran. Haniyeh's assassination happened less than 24 hours after Israel killed Hezbollah's most senior military commander Fawad Shakur in an air attack at the Lebanese capital Beirut. Israel claimed the attack was in reprisal for a rocket assault that killed 12 children and young people from the Arab Druze community in the Israel-occupied Golan Heights. At the United Nations Security Council meeting, Palestine said the global community must stop Israel from dragging the Middle East into the abyss, while China, Russia and Algeria condemned Haniyeh's assassination. The United States, United Kingdom and France raised what they said was Iranian backing for destabilizing actors in the region, while Japan said it feared an all-out war in the Middle East. Fader Abdelhadi Nasser, the Deputy Permanent Observer of the State of Palestine to the United Nations, said Israel has been the oppressor, tormentor and murderer of Palestinians for decades, and it is the long-standing destabilizer of our region. It must be stopped, she said, while also calling for accountability for the killing of Haniyeh, as well as the murder and injury of over 130 Palestinian children, women and men across this past 300 days of horror and hell in Gaza. Iran's United Nations Ambassador Amir Said Iravani said Tehran has consistently exercised maximum control but reserved its right to react decisively to Haniyeh's assassination. He called on the United Nations Security Council to condemn Israel and punish it with sanctions. Still on Israel-Gaza war, White House official John Kirby speaking on Monday, 2 days after Israel blamed Lebanon's Hezbollah for the attack that killed 12 people in the occupied Golan Heights, he reiterated U.S. backing for Israel but stressed that Washington still wanted regional de-escalation. The United States has publicly stated that it does not want this eventuality, even as it sent forces to the Middle East following the October 7th attack on Israel and the beginning of the war in Gaza in a show of support for Tel Aviv. The Middle East and the wider world has held its breath on many occasions since then, most notably when Israel killed 2 Iranian generals at Tehran's consulate in Damascus in April, followed by a telegraphed Iranian attack on Israel. At the time, reports showed that the US had worked to hold back Israel from mounting and to also keep Israel from launching a full-scale attack on Hezbollah in Lebanon. The US, meanwhile, has been one of the countries mediating a potential ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, although that looks to have encountered several stumbling blocks over the past few months. Now, after the brazen assassination of Hamas's political leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, which the Palestinian group and Iran blame on Israel, and the killing of Hezbollah senior commander Fawad Shakur in Beirut, all within a few hours, the US's twin objectives of a ceasefire and regional de-escalation look like they are in tatters. Brian Finucane, a senior advisor with the International Crisis Group's US program, said, according to reports, that regional de-escalation will ultimately emerge after a ceasefire in Gaza, and that without one, the potential for an expanded conflict drawing in US forces tension in the region was always present. But with the recent attacks, Finucane believes that the current prospects for a US brokered ceasefire have been complicated, if not derailed, in the short term. Away from Israel-Gaza conflict, now on judicial matters, prosecutors in the United Kingdom have charged a 17-year-old with murder and attempted murder over a knife attack that left 3 girls dead and injured 10 others in the seaside town of Southport in northwest England. On Thursday, the charges came as Southport cleaned up after a bout of far-right violence that included clashes at a mosque and agitators fired up by false claims the assailant was an asylum seeker confronted police close to the Prime Minister's residence in London. Merseyside police said the teenager, who has not been named because of his age, faces 3 counts of murder and 10 of attempted murder over people wounded in the attack during a Taylor Swift-themed summer holiday dance and yoga class. He is due to appear in court in Liverpool later on Thursday. Approximately 24 children were attending the holiday workshop on Monday when an attacker with a knife burst in. Alice De Silva Aguirre, 9, Elsie Dot Stancombe, 7, and Baby King, 6, died from their injuries. The 10 who were wounded included 5 girls and 2 adults who are in critical condition. Far-right demonstrators have started making violent protests, ostensibly in reaction to the attack, with a few hundred protesters hurling beer cans and flares near British Prime Minister Keir Starmer's residence on Downing Street in central London on Wednesday evening. Over 100 people were detained for offences including violent disorder and assault on an emergency worker, London's Metropolitan Police Force said. Starmer condemned the thuggery and said the protesters hijacked the community's grave. 5 men have been arrested in relation with the riots in Southport, majorly for violent disorder. 1 was arrested for possessing a knife and fighting. Kennedy said more arrests were expected. Norman Wallace, chief executive of the Southport Pleasureland Amusement Park, was one of the dozens of people who turned up with brushes and shovels to clear the debris. The protesters, who police said were supporters of the far-right English Defence League, were apparently triggered by false online rumors about the suspect. Police said a name circulating on social media spread by far-right activists and accounts of murky origin purporting to be new organizations was incorrect and that he was born in the United Kingdom, contrary to online claims he was an immigrant. The names of suspects under the age of 18 are usually not made public in the UK for legal reasons. From the streets of New Caledonia's capital, Nouméa, the debris has been cleared, but the shells of touched buildings are a continued reminder of the conflict that hit the French territory in the Pacific closely 3 months ago. The May protests were triggered by Paris's support for electoral reforms in the territory that pro-independence supporters say will have diluted the indigenous Kanak community's influence at the ballot box. But while that plan is now on the back burner, with the French government itself in flux following snap general elections this month, there is little sign that the political divisions is exposed have eased. Alain, a member of the Kanak and Socialist National Liberation Front, who spoke on condition of anonymity, said, and I quote, "It is very difficult for the Kanak people to live here. The French government still has a colonial strategy in New Caledonia and does not respect the political situation here." Demonstrations by pro-independence supporters broke out in mid-May across the islands in reactions to the reforms adopted by the National Assembly in Paris to expand New Caledonia's electoral roll to include around 25% mostly European settlers. Police and activists fought in the streets of Nomia, and homes as well as public and commercial buildings were set ablaze. Louis Mappo, New Caledonia's pro-independence prime minister, called for an end to the unrest, for people to use every way and means to bring back reason and calm. Rioting subsided after French President Emmanuel Macron agreed to halt the reform bill on June 12th, but the subsequent detention and transfer of 8 pro-independence leaders to jails in France for the inflamed tension. Numerous people are still in a state of shock after the turmoil. 10 people were killed, tourists fled, and the loss and damage were estimated at over $1 billion according to New Caledonia's Chamber of Commerce. Thousands of people also lost their jobs. In some city suburbs, residents continue to maintain blockades on their streets. On more stories, U.S. makes plea deals with 9/11 suspects. The United States has declared plea agreements with 3 men held in Guantanamo and accused of plotting the September 11, 2001 attacks, including alleged mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. The Pentagon did not release full details of the deals involving Mohammed, Walid bin Attah, and Mustafa al-Hawsawi, but reports said that 3 will plead guilty in exchange for a life sentence rather than death penalty. They were due to face trial in a military court at the maximum security facility, but their cases have been bogged down in legal maneuvering for years. The director of the Center on National Security at the Fordham University School of Law, Karen Greenberg, said the deals were a major development. Closely 3,000 people were killed when members of the Al-Qaeda group hijacked 4 domestic flights and flew them into the World Trade Center in New York and the Pentagon building outside Washington. The 4th plane crashed into a field in Pennsylvania after passengers fought back against the hijackers. The attack stoked when then-President George W. Bush called the war on terror, leading to the U.S. military invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq and years of U.S. operations against armed hardline groups elsewhere in the Middle East. The 3 men could appear in court as early as next week to officially enter their pleas. Mohammed was considered as one of Al-Qaeda chief Osama bin Laden's most trusted and intelligent lieutenants before he was captured in a covert operation in Pakistan in March 2003. He spent 3 years in secret CIA prisons before arriving in Guantanamo in 2006. An engineer who studied at a university in the U.S., Mohammed, was subjected to waterboarding 183 times while in CIA's custody before he was sent to Guantanamo, and was also aimed by other forms of torture and coercive questioning. Bin Attah, a Saudi of Yemeni origin, allegedly trained 2 of the hijackers who carried out the September 11 attacks, and his U.S. interrogators also said he confessed to buying the explosives and recruiting members of the team that killed 17 sailors in an attack on the USS Cole. He was captured with Mohammed in 2003 and was also held in a network of secret CIA prisons. Hawsawi is suspected of managing the finances for the 9/11 attacks. He was arrested in Pakistan on March 1, 2003 and was also held in secret prisons before being transferred to Guantanamo in 2006. The use of torture has proven one of the most formidable obstacles in U.S. efforts to try the men in Guantanamo, owing to the inadmissibility of evidence linked to abuse. Torture has accounted for much of the delay of the proceedings, along with the courtroom's location in Cuba. The military commissions at Guantanamo were created by ex-President Bush in 2001 to prosecute people accused of organizing the September 11th and other attacks outside the bounds of U.S. criminal law. Now, anti-coup forces push northern offensive New Myanmar. On June 25th, an explosion shook the town of Mogok in Myanmar's central Mandalay region on June 25th, sending Lasu and her family rushing for shelter in a close-by trench. Over the next 3 days, they waited on ground for the fighting to stop, but it only got worse. She decided to flee at 3 months pregnant and with a 12-year-old child. I find myself carrying out pet dog in front of the motorcycle, riding through Mogok to Mandalay with tears streaming down my face, she said. This was the reality of fleeing. Lasu is one of closely 41,000 people who have fled their homes since a new round of fighting broke out in the Mandalay region and northern Shan state in late June, according to the United Nations, which says 3 million people have been forced from their homes Myanmar, most of them since the 2021 military coup. Data collected by the Thai Student Union, a community-based humanitarian group, shows that the number of displaced by the recent fighting in northern Shan State and Mandalay region may be closer to 100,000. The TSU also found that 141 civilians were killed and a further 100 wounded from June 15th to July 18th. Bomb buildings burned out cars. There is debris strewn across the ground. The newest fights mark the second phase of a broader offensive against the military known as Operation 1027, which started last October. In the first phase, an alliance of ethnic armed organizations seized strategic territory along Shan State's eastern border with China in one of the most dramatic advances for groups opposing the military since the coup. Now, resistant forces are fighting for control over an area stretching 280 kilometers 174 miles from Mandalay to the city of Lashio, which serves as the military's northeastern regional command center. So far, forces led by the Tang National Liberation Army, Myanmar National Democratic Alliance Army, and Mandalay People's Defense Forces (PDF) have claimed control over Magok, known for its lucrative ruby mines, and the northern Shan state towns of Kukme and Nuan Kyo, among other areas. On July 25th, the MDAA claimed it had taken control of Lashio. However, the fight for full control of the city as well as the town of Kwagme appears to be ongoing. Operation 1027 currently has the potential to create a continuous pathway of resistance control from the Chinese border across Aye Yerwadi River through Myanmar's central highlands, according to Nathan Ruza, a geospatial analyst with the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. He said the offensive signifies advanced levels of coordination between ethnic armed organizations and PDFs formed after the coup, but also cautioned that its further success relies hugely on the ability of northern Shan State ethnic armed organizations, some of Myanmar's strongest, to peacefully resolve questions over power and influence among themselves. In African scenes, over Western Sahara plan, Algeria recalls ambassador to France. Algeria has withdrawn its ambassador from France after Paris recognized a controversial Moroccan strategy to give limited autonomy to Western Sahara under its sovereignty. On Tuesday, French President Emmanuel Macron said in a letter that he saw that this as the only way of solving the long-standing clash over the former Spanish colony. Our support for the autonomy plan proposed by Morocco in 2007 is clear and constant, said Macron in the letter sent to Morocco's King Mohammed VI. Morocco claimed authority over the Western Sahara in 1975 and controls most of its territory. Algeria supports the outlaw Polisario Front, which claims to represent the indigenous Sahrawi people and wants the Western Sahara to be an independent state. France's decision to change its decades-long position on the status of Western Sahara is a key victory for Morocco. Paris joins a rising number of countries, including Spain, the United States, and many African nations that in recent years have supported Rabat's position. But it is a significant blow to the Polisario Front, which has slammed France's backing for Morocco as a bid to shore up its waning influence in Africa. Algeria accused the French government of denying the right of the Sahrawi people to self-determination. We take a breather now. When we come back, I'll bring you stories from Nigeria. Don't go anywhere. You're welcome back. Now, stories from Nigeria, and we begin with tension. Food prices surge as protests begin today. Again, prices of foodstuff had increased in major markets across the country as Nigerians engaged in panic buying in a bid to stock their homes before the planned nationwide hashtag End Bad Governance protests begin today, according to report. This comes as last-ditch steps by the federal government to avert the protests failed to arrest the momentum created by the organizers who insisted the protest will go on as planned. The protest organizers want an improvement in the rising cost of living and a reversal of some harsh government policies, mainly the removal of petrol subsidy. The subsidy removal, along with ongoing security issues in farming region, has led to surge in transportation costs and subsequent food inflation. In a late rally to stop the demonstration on Wednesday, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Senator George Akume, addressed an emergency press conference where he again admonished Nigerians to shun the proposed protest. Other top officials also pleaded for the suspension of the protest, including the Minister of Information and National Orientation Mohammed Idris, Atiku Bagudu, Budget and Planning, Wali Edun, Economy, and Presidential Media Aide Bayo Onanuga, among others. They reeled out all the people-oriented policies and programs implemented by the Tinubu government and sought the understanding of Nigerians. Earlier on Wednesday, Inspector General of Police Kayode Ogbetokun also called for an urgent press conference at the force headquarters. Also, the National Assembly held a plenary on Wednesday after cutting its recess short. The Speaker of the House of Representatives, Tajuddin Abbas, addressed youth at a hastily convened town hall meeting at the National Assembly complex, where he repeated his appeal to the protest organizers to embrace dialogue with the federal government to find solutions to the hardship in the country. The SGF, in his remarks, said the government recognized the right to protest, but was wary of the planned protests being hijacked by bandits, insurgents, and other criminals. And finally, on the news, Senate raises CBN Ways and Means 2 FG from 5% to 10%. The Nigerian Senate has promptly passed a bill to amend the Central Bank of Nigeria CBN Act to add the Apex Bank's total ways and means advances to the federal government from 5% to a maximum of 10%. On Wednesday, the executive bill sponsored by Bamidele Opeyemi, the Senate leader, passed first, second, and third reading during an emergency session of the Senate. Ways and Means is a loan facility through which the CBN finances the federal government's budget shortfalls. The facility permits the government to borrow from the CBN if it requires short-term or emergency finance to fund significant projects. The amendment bill originally proposed a borrowing limit of 15%, but many lawmakers, however, cautioned that the borrowing limit should not surpass 10% to ensure fiscal discipline. Consequently, during a close-by-close consideration of the bill, Abba Moro, the Deputy Senate Minority, moved for an amendment that the word 15% be substituted for 10% in Clause 2. The majority of senators supported this amendment. Also, Abdul Ningi moved for an amendment that the borrowing should only be limited to capital expenditure, but lawmakers murmured in disapproval and no lawmaker seconded his motion. Opeyemi, in his lead debate, explained that the very essence of the bill is to allow the federal government to meet its immediate and future obligations due to the government's growing need for funds to finance the budget deficits and other expenses. The Senate leader further explained that the advances will provide quick funds to tackle budget shortfalls, finance essential government expenditures, and help maintain financial market stability by preventing government default on its obligation, adding that it will inject money into the economy, stimulating economic activity and potentially creating jobs, allow the government to support critical sectors like agriculture, healthcare, and infrastructural development, and lower the government borrowing costs by providing cheaper funds than the traditional borrowing method. A recap of major stories says Ukraine gets F-16 fighter jets to boost defense against Russia. United Nations Security Council fear all-out war after Haniyeh killing in Iran risks dragging US into war. 17-year-old charged over South Pole stabbing as protests rage. France's colonial plan blamed for New Caledonia's division. And that's all on the news. Thanks for watching. Be careful and have a nice day.